welcome back to Chancellor's Chats. I'm Lisa Cullen, and on our latest episode today, we've got Bill Ryan. Bill Ryan is a independent technical nutritional support manager, and in conjunction with Phar Vet. Bill, could you just tell us a little bit about your background and your association to Phar Vet?
I suppose I have a checkered background, Lisa, to say the least. I've been involved in agriculture all my life. I spent 15 years as a farm manager, and then I moved on to selling ruminant feed, and out of that I sort of built up a consultancy business. So at the moment what I basically do is I was one of the first people in Ireland to do cow signals, which is basically a coaching system for animal welfare and farm management systems. So we basically at the moment we offer not only to farmers but also maybe to businesses like ourselves, where they're looking at the current changing environment and stuff like that. So they're looking at the system is fairly well working well, but to future proof it, then what do we need to look at? So that's sort of what I...
So you're analysing and moving forward as well as your background, I suppose, in animal care, nutrition.
Yeah, exactly. So I suppose big history in farm management, so that's just at the back end, that's sort of the basics of the whole lot of it. Then I suppose to know how you take, say, products or services and how they fit into individual farms, and what farms should be looking at when they're looking at changing a product, or do they need to change a product or stuff like that. And also then if they're changing their system. So a lot of the time there, what we've been looking at, say, maybe from 2014 to 2019 really, it was all expansion. So we were dealing with all new entrants, farmers that were going up in cow numbers, changing from sucklers or tillage to dairy. And since 2019 then there has been a bit more of an environmental focus on it. So what do we need to know to make ourselves compliant, number one, and then number two, how do we maximise the output with a focus on more sustainability, reduced
future-proofing.
Future-proofing.
Yes, absolutely. So. Well, I suppose funnily you said that, and you know, you were a farm manager for many years, and we'll bring it back to maybe the foundations of the start of it. And as a farmer or anyone related to agriculture, the foundation or the fundamental principle of farming is animal husbandry.
Yeah.
And if you bring it back to that, and something as, I suppose, simple as dosing, that's where we'll start at. Like, you know, there's so many places where we're getting it wrong, whether we're overdosing, underdosing, age of animals, resistance. There's so much to think about. But if we just pare it all back and start from the beginning, when should we be dosing animals, young stock?
And that's a great question, Lisa. Like, when do you dose? And if we looked at traditionally, we dose by the calendar. So we dose 3 weeks after going out, and we dose 4 weeks or 6 weeks after that, stuff like that. And in the past sort of couple of years, sustainability and resistance and all those things have been seen on farms, and we all can give instances of where we've seen products not working for particular reasons and stuff like that. So what we're looking at now in a dosing situation is we're sort of looking at the life cycle of the parasite. So whether that be stomach worm, gut worm,
liver fluke.
And within that system then is the old traditional products, the go-to products. They have either no longer available or they've run out of license, and there's alternatives. Then we have, particularly in the dairy, we have a very narrow window of products that we can use.
Correct, yeah.
We have very few, if any, in zero milk withhold antibiotics.
Yes.
We have probably a very limited choice when it comes to fluke treatments. And I suppose the big one in a dairy farmer situation, probably currently sort of looking at July or August, with a very dry spring, really dry April, May into June. So if you look at the life cycle of your, say, hooves will take, for argument's sake. So a cow, if she isn't exposed to it for 4 months, so she isn't exposed to the L3s and the L4s, larvae, she automatically loses her immunity.
Really?
Yes, but she'll keep her immunity to the adult.
Wow.
So if you get a real dry, and we can see a little bit of this coming in at the moment, whereas July has been wet, temperatures are nice and high, and we can see a few cows now starting, phone calls are coming in. I'm sure you're getting them. I've cows coughing, or I've calves coughing. They weren't coughing all year and they were dosed maybe back in May. So if you go May, June, July, August, they could be dosed 4 months.
Yes.
They haven't been exposed because the weather was dry, so they have picked up no new larvae because they're cute little boys. When it gets too dry,
so the larva is increasing their immunity, or
yes,
keeping their immunity ticking.
Keeping their immunity ticking. So they need to keep their immunity ticking for that larva. Now, once they get an adult lungworm, that will stay in their system. That memory will stay forever.
Okay, yeah.
So you can dose your calves. Typical example of is you have your calves this year.
Yes.
And you dose them as they cough.
Yes.
Stuff like that. Everything is grand. And you put them in for the winter. And next thing is you go out next year, 2024, end of May temperatures. So once the temperature hits 15 degrees and we have nice soft moisture, plenty of moisture, so we'll say end of May, start of June, and you go someday and you see your yearlings, they're flying it. And the first day you get up, 1 or 2 of them is coughing. So what's wrong with him? And you go out the next day, there's a lot more of them coughing.
Yeah.
That's the larva that they had consumed 7 to 10 days before, burrowed from their intestine, through their lymph glands, up into their bloodstream, up into their lungs, and then it got into the lungs, and that's a beautiful environment. So there's plenty of moisture, and there's all little cavities.
Yeah.
And they have grown like little worms. You can see them under a microscope. And then they're beginning to mature, and they're getting them up out of the lung.
Yes.
They're actually coughing.
That's the symptom
the way
of
they
coughing.
get them up. They
yes.
cough them up. That's the adult.
Wow.
And you say, well, why have they who's? But because they haven't been exposed to it maybe for 6 months, they've lost immunity to that larva, and they start coughing.
And this is like, because you would have always assumed like it's young stock that you have to dose, obviously. But then what you're telling us that even an older animal, maybe it'll be 2 to 3 years old, that has exposure has never had adult ooze or exposure.
No, if they hadn't, once they haven't been exposed to the larva.
The larva.
It is the larva, what they call L3s, L4s.
Yes.
If they go for anything over 4 months without exposure to those, their own natural immunity tapers down.
And they're exposed then to actually getting who's or the symptoms of who's.
So they have a high risk then if they're exposed to. So if you get a lot of, these, what they do, they can overwinter. So the larva, whose larva overwinters.
Yes.
On dung pads, burrows into the ground.
Yes.
And then when the moisture comes, they become alive. And then you'd often see little moles and stuff like that on dung pads, little spores. So when the wind comes and blows, they carry them on so they can infect out a huge distance.
Okay.
Now, gutworm can't do the same sort of, they can move but they can't do the same. The next thing, they hoof them up. So like with the modern climate with higher stocking rates,
yes,
we're grazing tighter, we're growing more grass, we have shorter grazer cycles, so it's fitting in more and more ideally to the life cycle of the parasite.
And becoming more prevalent every year.
Yeah.
That you're going to get more exposure to who's in your animals.
So the higher the stocking rate, the more exposure, the more risk you have of more parasites.
Perfect storm for these to live in.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's one thing to be looking at is who's in, young animals and of course older animals. That's it.
In younger animals and in older animals. And like the advice there then is to literally, once you over 10% of the herd coughing.
Yes.
And you have an idea they haven't been exposed to it for anything 4 weeks or more, you dose the whole herd, not just because it'll just, if you get a very bad infection, it'll just smother them, and sometimes you get what they call bacterial pneumonia. And
you're looking at then loss of thrive in younger animals, loss of production and thrive obviously in older animals, again.
Lung damage, so technically you can be opening yourself up to sort of bacterial pneumonias, weakening their immune system, so you can be getting virus pneumonias. It's just putting pressure on their immune system.
Well, yeah. We're moving on from who's. We might talk a little bit about maybe stomach worms.
Yeah.
As it stands. I know there's a new scheme out this year to the vets.
Yeah.
Where they're testing dung samples.
Yeah.
For, I suppose, you're pinpointing the perfect time to do your initial dose. Would that be correct?
Yeah, it's a combination of both. So it's known as the TASSUP scheme. It was floated last year on a pilot, and it has been extended into this year. And it's a very, very valuable service, because in the modern climate and the way we're looking at things is like, it's very hard to manage something if you don't measure it. So what it's doing is you're measuring what we call your oozote, which is basically your coccidias and stuff like that. So they're basically the eggs, and you're testing worm eggs as well. So it can do two things. It can show you what's the ideal. So if the worm count is going up,
Yes.
that means then you have to control it, and particularly if you link it in with weight gains.
Yes.
So look, if some animals have a better, it's like us all, some animals are better at generating their own immunity than others. So if an animal is thriving and the egg count is under your 500, but they're still doing their 0.6 or 0.7 or 6
Live weight gain,
grams a day, well then you'd say maybe might get away without dosing at that stage.
Okay.
But in 3 weeks' time, if you weigh them, or a month's time, and they're down under that, well
It's
then
time to be dosing
it's
then.
time to be dosing then.
Right, so if you pinpoint your initial dosing from the scheme,
Yes.
from the task scheme, and you get that correct,
Yes.
the follow through on every other dose after that will be correct as well,
Becomes much easier.
because you're following a life cycle of the worm.
Yes. In
Yep.
theory. Now-
And that's what helps.
oh yeah, and that's what makes dosing more efficiently. That's
Yes.
what makes it more efficient. The other couple of things that you really need to be aware of, shall we say, when you're dosing is that number one, the life cycle, number two, the pressure on the system. So that's your fecal egg counts, that's your TASAP scheme. And the next one then is don't underdose. You need to overdose.
Really?
So you dose, always dose for the heaviest animal in the group, not an average.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because what happens there then is if you're underdosing, what you're doing is we'll take it, you have a worm population of 100 worms and you're underdosing. What you're doing is you're not getting an effective kill on the 100 worms. So if you look at your TASAP scheme, you need to have 97. So if you test before, so if you do your fecal egg count before you dose, you need to get a 97% reduction in the eggs, depending on the product you're using. So something between 7 days and 14 days after your dose. And then what you're looking for there is you need to get 97%. So if you're not getting that, that means that you could have a possible resistance to that wormer. So that means that those worms, there's a high percentage of those worms not being
Killed.
killed.
Very good. So it's something to be aware of as well.
Yeah, it's something to be aware of as well, yeah.
But right, okay, so moving on from maybe worms, we're going to move on to maybe fluke. Now, here's a thing I suppose a lot of farmers would ask. Obviously, a lot of your drenches or your doses are kind of like worm and fluke packs, you know, that kind of way they'll do the most of them.
Yeah.
But fluke doesn't have to be done. Like, obviously, weather dependent, environment dependent.
Yeah.
Fluke may not have to be done till closer into the summer, early autumn, is that correct?
Yeah, generally what you find is that on most farms you won't really have a fluke burden early in the summer. It'll come more into late summer and into autumn depending on the farms. I suppose again it depends on the type of ground. So if you're on heavier, wetter type of ground, you're depending on the snail, there's a lot more around. It's not more, or wet years you tend to get a bit more. So again, I suppose it's the target your product. And a lot of them, you know, some of the products just do adult.
Yes.
Right.
There's no one dose will kill the whole stages.
Exactly. So again, it comes a little bit back to what we're testing about is how do you sort of manage your testing, so and how do you manage your dosing program to fit in. So again, a little bit of that is, I suppose the factories do huge work there in that you'll get a liver report back and the liver damage and stuff like that. Again, look through and see how much damage you have, see is it coming in at particular times of the year, and then again dose appropriately for the right rates and stuff like that.
Absolutely, but when you actually think of the life cycle of liver fluke, and we all did it in Leaving Cert,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
remember it well, I remember the circle. Like, the liver fluke has to go through a lot to end up in his primary host.
He does, yeah, he does.
And to be fair to the devil, like he works hard to actually get back into the animal.
Oh yeah.
And to just go again.
Yeah, and I suppose it's just to understand that some years he can get there faster than other years, depending on the climate and the conditions like that.
And he has to get the snail as a host.
He has to get the snail as a host.
Yes.
So that's why you need moisture and you need heat again
For the snail.
For the snail. So all these parasites, the big, like it's like any beddies, right? They like heat and moisture. So if they have two of them, they're in beddy heaven, if you know what I mean. So they're the two things that keep them going. So again, drain and really cut back on fluke. I suppose again.
Someone was also saying lime, altering the pH.
Yeah, all like
can make it hard for the liver fluke to survive, is it?
yeah. Again, it's like any of those, like any sort of bacteria and stuff like that. Their ideal pH is sort of sitting in around that 6.5 neutral pH. So like if you put out a lot of lime, you can get a spike in pH, so that can help to
reduce the burden.
Yeah, for short term.
Yeah.
But then you just have to be careful again on that. If you haven't lime for a good while, you could be dropping a little bit, so it mightn't be quite as ideal. The other thing is that there's a lot of talk about re-wetting ground now. A lot of ground sort of going back into environmental schemes.
Yeah.
So that's probably going to
increase
the risk of some of those fellas. Like we see it in 2012, basically rumen fluke was gone.
Yeah.
We hadn't, most people hadn't heard of it. And then 2012 into 13, very wet
a lot of products couldn't be actually got that time.
A lot of products, well, yeah, they had been used for a long time.
Yeah.
So then they weren't available when they were needed.
And we actually saw at that point, there was massive effect on production, yield, thrive with this rumen fluke.
Yeah.
It came as a surprise to an awful lot of people at that time.
Oh, it did, and like it particularly when maybe not up the East Coast so much, but particularly up the West Coast.
Oh, it was on the East Coast that year too?
Was it?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So like there was, like I see it particularly sort of West Cork, Kerry, up along there. Like there was fellas literally losing calves.
And I think that was followed on by, I think that was 3 or 4 wet summers in a row.
Yeah.
That actually led to this.
That's right. You had a couple of real wet sort of back ends and wet summers, and just you had a slow build up, and that's you sort of got to, that was 2012 then was the icing on the cake, really.
There you go.
For those fellas, yeah.
But yeah, it's funny when you said about re-wetting of the bogs, and it's like, it's almost sometimes in agriculture, it's like 1 step forward, 2 back, and you're always seeming against grain, and ultimately, really, it's the weather is a massive problem, isn't it? Yeah,
and it's changes you make, and you make them for the good of one thing, and they have a negative impact on something else.
Yeah.
And it's just to be sort of, sometimes we only look at the good when we're doing it, but then we just sort of need to look at it, maybe there could be a negative side to this.
And you're trying your best as farmers or anyone in the agricultural trade not to be overusing the likes of doses as well. And but I suppose, look, like schemes that's what's available now to the vets, like they will help this.
Oh, they will, yeah. And like I suppose a lot of farmers probably had been doing this at a level before the scheme came in, that we're getting a little bit like, look, costs are going up, we all know that, everybody in the industry is looking for value for money and timely intervention. So like technology has moved on a lot, like the testing for everything has a lot more available, and there's a lot more knowledge about it, and again, it's the old adage, if you want to manage, you need to measure.
Yeah.
So, and that's, so you're basically, it's only a snapshot in time as such. Any testing is just a snapshot in time. But the beauty with it is that if you do that over a number of years, you can see a trend, and it's sort of, you can say, right, we need to focus here now.
Yes.
Because this is where we're sort of going. So that's where the real benefit in testing is, that it gives you a snapshot in time of
what's working,
what isn't working, and what we need to improve on.
Very good. No, you're correct. Just when I have you there about the worms in dairy cows.
Yeah.
It's something that a lot of farmers over the last few years was always doing sometime around the 1st of June.
Yes.
They were dosing for worms with a product with 0 milk withdrawal.
Yes.
Some people saw a bounce, more people didn't.
Yes.
Now a lot of people are testing their milk through or worm count through their milk samples.
Yes.
How do you feel about that, or would you encourage farmers to actually dose for worms?
And again, I suppose that we know that animals build up their own immunity.
Yes.
Right. So the milk test is a very good, particularly on dairy herds, it's a very good picture of what's actually happening. So it's, if we think back to COVID, it was the ELISA test, so it was able to show you what was, so you had your antigen test to test you were positive, and then sort of when the whole thing sort of settled down, we got a handle on it, they ran the rapid test, which was basically a ELISA test, and that was to show you that if you had a low titer, it wouldn't really show you. So that's what the milk shows you. It shows you what's the cow's, or particularly the cow, what's her immune system building. So has she been exposed to it? Is she getting a very, very high load at the moment? And do you need to do something about it? Or is she managing it? So if her ELISA is moving away and she's don't have a milk drop and she's thriving well and she's back in calf, well then in a lot of cases you don't need to do anything about it, with the exception of hoos. And the other one that you need to be careful of, particularly in first calf heifers, or second calf heifers, and if they're being reared off farm. So we have a lot of contract rearing.
Yes.
A lot of outblocks maybe being used
Yeah.
for rearing heifers and stuff like that. And what you can find is that worm species, there's lots of different species.
Yes.
So you can actually have a predominant worm species on one farm that may not be on another farm.
So if you reared heifers out 6 miles away,
Yeah.
different type worm than what you have at home
Maybe,
when that cow
Yeah,
comes back.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing then is we have what you call your osteotasia, so it's your gut worms. So they realise that the conditions aren't right to be shedded, so they go dormant in the animal system, and they go dormant in the environment, in the fields and stuff like that. Then when the temperature comes back up, nice warm, plenty of moisture, they get up and going again. So basically they reactivate. So they're able to judge what the temperature. See, these are cute little buggers. They're like anybody, they know their way around the systems. So then what you find is, so if you have, say, particularly first calf heifers that's coming in the month of March, they're not hitting peak yield quite as well as what they should be.
Yes.
Right? Well then, is there a possibility that they have osteotasia? So then you can sort of test, but in that case, a lot of times, particularly with osteotasia, it's a group, they're vulnerable, so you're probably better off to dose and then test just to see, do your test-up test and your fecal egg count test afterwards, then just to see. So the problem then we have with dairy is zero milk withdrawal.
Yes.
Right.
And a limited amount of products.
Yeah, well, basically, ipromectins is the active ingredient. So it's like any dosing. There's lots of brand names.
Yes.
But it's the active ingredients and the percentage of active ingredient.
Yes.
That's more important to do the job. So that's why you need to just have a good relationship with your vet or your licensed merchant or whoever it is, and don't deal with the brand. More so, deal with the active ingredient
and what's good for your particular farm,
and what's going to suit your farm best. So like in your ectomectins then, which is your milk withhold, we need to protect them very, very closely, because
don't overuse
them, targeted use of them, protect them, because look, there's only one there at the moment.
Yes.
They cover your gut worms, and they cover your hoos, and they'll cover some of your lice species as well.
Yeah, and they're grand for the flies as well. It takes one spot on out or something like that.
Exactly, job done. So what you're looking at there then is that timely approach. So if your heifers aren't, probably that sort of March, April time, cover your osteotasia and then wait until they cough afterwards. And I suppose there's a lot of international research coming around at the minute. Look, dairy farmers are busy people. Herds have grown exponentially. It's no different to any other industry. Labour is a problem. But I suppose what you're looking for really then is, when you're dosing, is what we call is your bioavailability. And particularly for dairy cows, if we have only one active ingredient, we really want to make sure that animal is getting the biggest amount of that as they can, as fast as they can into the system, controlling the parasite, and then letting them build their own immunity afterwards.
Yeah.
And then there's a little bit of a debate going on within the industry at the moment then about how do you apply. So I suppose if you
most of them are topical.
A lot of them are topical, yeah.
Yeah.
But then there's a lot, particularly New Zealand studies started, and there's Irish studies going on at the minute, is that to show that if you're using topical products, you can have a big variation about how much is actually absorbed in, and there's a big thing. So I suppose, as a fellow said to me, my own vet said to me the other day, when I was talking to him about this, and he says, well, it's like this. He said, if you went into the doctor and he said you need a treatment for something, and he shook it on top of your head and sent you out the door and asked you for €50, would you be happy?
Yeah. You feel safer if it was, injected?
Yeah, and well, I suppose, again, bioavailability, like what we're sort of seeing is that topical, it's all these things are how dedicated the person are to.
Yeah.
So if you're doing...
And precision.
It's precision.
Yeah.
So look, it's on the box.
Yes.
Follow the box.
Read the instruction. And it is really a case of working smarter, not harder.
Exactly.
Or don't make it harder for the future.
And don't make it harder for the future. But then realistically, if you want to know there's something, if you're going to take something yourself, right, orally is an easy way to do it, and at least you know it in the system.
Yes.
Right? And then if you really want to get something really effective, like if you're really, really sick and you go to the doctor, you go to the hospital, he IVs it. So basically the bioavailability there is 100%.
Yes.
It gets in, does its job, it's gone out of your system within a couple of days, job done. When we were going for the COVID vaccine, if the nurse sort of poured it down your arm or rubbed it on your arm,
She'd be looking at her.
You would be inclined to look at her. So, you got it subcutaneous. And like subcutaneous, basically you're up at sort of 90% bioavailability.
There you go.
So if you bring that into financial terms, I don't say
better return on investment.
Yeah, well look, if you look at whatever the product you're using, if it's costing you, we'll say, I'll keep it simple because I'm not very good at maths, it's costing you a tenner.
Yes.
Right? And you have a bioavailability of 90+%, right? You're 93 or 94 euros, 90 is gone straight into the...
Yeah, you'll take your 940 sooner than maybe topical 50%.
Yeah, and look, and if you get a young fella that's on the phone and there's something going on Snapchat or something like that and he's...
There you go.
You could be down as low as 17%.
God knows where the poor will be.
Yeah.
down the pit or anything.
Yeah. So like I suppose they're the things that you need to look at then as well is, are you getting the full bang for the euro you're spending?
Yes. Yeah.
And that's where a bit of independent advice comes in then as well. Look, what's the system like? Who's doing it?
There's a huge amount to take in on that, Bill.
Yeah,
to be fair, but we can't let you go because you're very, 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 very. Your expert advice is needed on minerals, and especially copper. Like us as agricultural reps on the road.
Yes.
We see a huge amount of copper deficiency, young animals, and even in young dairy stock.
Yeah, and I suppose it's the change in environment is where we see a lot of this coming in, and I suppose again growth patterns, and I've been very involved, I suppose, for the past 20 odd years in this, and it happened out of a farm I was managing, where we thought we were doing proper mineral supplementation, and we were doing proper mineral supplementation, but we were doing other things in the background that was antagonising the uptake of that in the animal. So like you look at it this year.
This is opening a whole new can of worms though, pardon the pun on the last one.
Oh yeah, yeah.
We're going down like lime, sulphur, molybdenum.
Yeah.
This is a massive one.
Yeah, and it is, and like look, there was, I don't know the exact figures, but I'd read in the press, like the liming scheme the subsidy was oversubscribed by multiples of what they thought it would be, right? So that's a whole heap of lime to go back out at the end of the year. And we do know like that lime frees up molybdenum.
Yes.
Right. Okay, there's certain parts of the country where molybdenum isn't a problem, but they're in the minority.
Yes.
Compared to the rest of the country. When you free up molybdenum, basically just loves copper.
It locks up copper in the animal, is that correct?
It does. So basically, if you think the simplest way I can explain it is, it's like magnets. So if you take molybdenum as a minus magnet and you take copper as a plus magnet, they just love to bond together.
Yes.
And once they bond together,
they're unavailable.
A molybdenum copper bond, and then the animal is not able to absorb that into their system.
The copper.
Yeah. Okay. And I suppose then if you look at from the other side of the rose, that molybdenum then also can have a little bit of a negative effect, so it can also attract itself to calcium.
Yes.
So then like in dairy cows, you growing animals, it can actually reduce down the amount of calcium they absorb from the feeder to feed them.
And that's actually very important for growth, bone development.
Yeah, it's very important for structure.
Yes.
100% muscle tension, you need calcium. You see guys playing sport at a high level there. They're really under pressure playing a hard match. Next thing you go down with cramp, that just means that their muscle isn't able to extract enough of calcium from the bone into the blood to get it to the muscle. to get oxygen back flowing quick enough. So little things like that. So that's the other thing. And I suppose what we're really finding in the past couple of years is there's a huge lift in sulphur. And there's no doubt, look, sulphur in the environment has gone down.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And this is right, that sulphur antagonises this problem more.
Yeah, it does. Like what happens then is, I suppose, sulphur really helps to immobilise ammonia in the soil and gets the nitrogen that we spread.
Helps the uptake of nitrogen.
Into the plant, right. I suppose what happens with sulphur then is it's luxury. So once you get a lot of growth, a lot of that sulphur shoots up the plant very, very quickly. So when it gets into the animal system then, it binds too. So sulphur then is the negative magnet again. So it binds with molybdenum, and it forms a bond there. That sucks out copper. Sulphur can also have a negative effect on selenium availability. And selenium, as we know, is very important for the immune system and for iodine absorption.
Breeding animals as well, yeah.
So then you can run into that. So look, when you're changing things like that, it's always very good to go away and take a mineral sample of your forages, or take a blood sample from your cows, or a milk sample, or whatever it is. Have a look and see if I made those changes. Are we getting luxury uptakes, and can they have a negative impact on that? And I suppose, again, we're now in August, and it's interesting what you see is that if you look at, and I was only looking at this for a discussion group meeting the other day, where there was bits of issues around summer scour syndrome and calves not thriving quite as well as what they thought they were, and weanlings and yearlings not thriving quite very well. So I went back just one night and I had to look through all the samples I did over the past 5 or 6 years. And what we're finding is that there is, when you're testing grasses in particular, what you're finding is graze grasses, the level of mineral within that grass is dropping during the summer.
Yes.
But the interesting thing about it was, when you took your grass measuring data that's available, right, and you overlaid it, you could see the grass growth curve was going down and the mineral curve was going down with it.
So it's directly related.
So literally, the store of all those minerals are in the ground.
Yes.
So if they're in the ground, if the grass is growing a little bit slower,
the amount of minerals
coming up
slower.
When you think about it, it isn't quite as obvious. Makes sense. And in particular, what we're finding there then is that particularly cobalt, sort of June, July and August.
Yes.
So anybody involved in sheep will say, should we know that? We dose every time. But a lot of...
This is the flaky ears now, isn't it?
It
cobalt.
gets flaky ears, and it can be, it can turn out a little bit of CCN. You can get a little bit of other things going on. Calves not quite thriving as well as what it is. There's some people are sort of saying at the minute that it might be sort of linked. It's very important. Cobalt is very important with fibre to generate B vitamins.
Very good. And cobalt for feet as well?
Cobalt, very, very, cobalt is basically one of the building blocks with zinc for what we call body tissue. So it's very important in that regard as well.
As in hardening the hoof.
Hardening your hoof and just your nail quality and skin quality and all that. So again, flaky skin, it gets dry and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So again, traditionally we wouldn't have had an issue with it. What we're finding now with stocking rates going up and stuff like that, animals, two elements that they don't store iodine, they store cobalt.
Yes.
So they need to get a level every day. So.
And if it's not in the grass, it's going to have to be supplemented.
Well, all these things, if your farm, if you identify that the grass isn't producing it, and the animals aren't quite doing, this is where we're talking about weighing and measuring and working the two together, and you're not getting the tries that you should be getting, or you may be getting little bits of issues like CCN in calves or whatever, scabby ears in sheep.
Yeah. When you mean CCN in calves now,
that basically means what happens is a calf, you go out and we'll
this could be the Cork version of something in Kilkenny now, we don't know.
Oh, right. Well, CCN
we don't know.
Right. Right, apologies. I'm originally tipped, so don't hold that against me.
Worse again.
So basically what is, you go out and you see the first calf, generally you don't really spot him. So there's a group of calves, there's one calf and he's just behind the group for a day or two.
Yes.
And then you go out and you usually find him in a heap someplace. He's stuck in a ditch or he's out falling into a drain. And then you begin to notice another fella getting the same way. And you go looking at him and you get to vet, and next thing you discover that he's blind. So basically what's happening is that B vitamins and cobalt is a key building block of B12 in particular.
This is something that's affecting the brain, obviously, then of the cat.
So
similar to meningitis, possibly.
Very similar to meningitis. Very, very similar. Only meningitis is a bacterial infection. This basically what it means is that the nervous system is like an electric cord.
Yes.
Right, and the coating on the outside of it. So they need cobalt, magnesium, B12, all that to generate that core. So to put the insulation around the nerves. Mm-hmm. And if one of those are missing, mm-hmm. what actually happens then is that coating on the nervous system weakens. Mm-hmm. And the first signs is that you get your calf, he's a bit nervy, he tends to go blind, he's not able to stand up, he's not able to walk straight.
And it can be very much misconstrued as meningitis then, I assume, and misdiagnosed.
And misdiagnosed, And look, if you're a human and you suspect meningitis, they take a lumbar puncture. If you're an expensive animal, they'll do the same. But if you're dealing with a beef calf or...
I understand that,
you won't take that. So a lot of times is if you get it, the sort of advice is to talk to your vet.
Yes.
Have a good discussion with him. Have a look at, are you grazing real short, lush grass? Haven't you a lot of fibre in the diet? You might be doing a lot of supplementation.
Yeah. But and that's the thing, like we have to supplement minerals at this, I suppose, stocking rate. Yeah. Environmental factors, like supplementation of minerals is probably the best practice around these problems.
Yeah, well, I suppose it comes back to what we said already, is that the systems are changing.
Yes.
Both internally for financial reasons and externally for environmental reasons.
Yeah.
And on those changes, you need to measure them. So if you're having little bits of problems, if you had a couple of calves that you went out and was suspected meningitis, it might be well worth asking your vet to take a blood sample off of those.
Yeah, mineral analysis
and
or
get
whatever.
a full mineral analysis and see is there a potential cobalt deficiency there. Or just talking to somebody like yourself, in Dalton's or whoever you're dealing with, and just taking a grass sample. And then to measure, particularly if you're dealing with calves we thought to say down to 4 centimetres.
Yes.
Now, calves don't graze to 4 centimetres because they're selective.
Yes.
So you probably cut at 5 minimum, something between 5 and 6.
Bring a sample, a herbage sample. Take
a herbage sample into your local lab or whoever you're dealing with, get your mineral sample back in it, see what it is. If you want to talk to somebody like myself, I can put that into my feed program.
Yes.
So I can take the figures off your analysis, put that into your feed program, and then see whatever we'll say for a calf is probably taking in 5 kilos, 6 kilos of dry matter a day. Put that in for 5 kilos of dry matter, and how far are we off his mineral requirement? Does he need to be supplemented?
There you go.
How much does he need to be supplemented?
But it's actually a true, again, like we know it's a snapshot in time, a test.
Yes.
But it's a true representation of what an animal is actually getting.
Exactly.
In that area, because you may have been, sometimes calves are just in an area, they're very rarely move too far away from each other because they have to move so often.
That's right.
So if you have a block of ground that's predominantly for your calves, well, if you do the herbage sample, this is it, lads. That's what's in it.
Yeah, and if you do that over sort of, you take, say, the rapid growth there in May. So if you do a herbage sample in May and you take another herbage sample with, say, July, August time, and then you do a silage sample.
Yes.
And you do that for 2 or 3 years. I know it'll probably cost you a couple of £100 to do it in total, but...
A loss of an animal is how many £100?
Exactly.
There you go. And it has to be quantified that way.
Yeah, and if you do it, generally what you'll find is that if the management structure isn't changing, what you'll find is after 2 or 3 years, you'll have a consistent trend.
Yes.
And it's very, very interesting. Like, if you reseed a field and you take the herbage sample, 9 times out of 10, it's different to what it was before you reseeded it.
Yes.
And that's just because the plant is settling in. The other thing is you're losing a lot of...
So established grassland, basically.
Yeah, established grassland, it's a little bit more consistent for the one.
And obviously something with a more denser root structure will obviously take up more minerals
and
as well.
And a deeper root structure. Yes. So, like, again, the whole thing to the big debate about multi-species. Mm-hmm. So, like, very important that if you're getting into multi-species, again, have a look at to make sure that you're testing that ground, because they've much deeper root, so they're pulling up a lot more, probably within potassium, which can have a negative effect. So it can be acidic, so it can have a negative, you can have a sort of a subclinical acidosis if you have a lot of rooting animals and you're using a lot of slurry, you're getting more potassium being taken up than if you're using a ryegrass sward. So there's lots of little things like that that you just
There's huge amount of things to actually look at though, like it like not trying to overcomplicate things, but there's probably an answer for every problem. It's just you have to find it.
Yeah, well look, if you don't have problems, if everything is going hunky-dory and you're happy with animal performance, you know, and they're hitting their target weights and their health is they're good and healthy, you're not having health issues, well then keep doing what you're doing.
Yes.
Right? If you're changing your system and your think is, you know, well,
or maybe you think Trove is gone down a bit, production is maybe waving a bit.
Yeah, exactly. So
time to look into things.
It's time then, just, do we need to talk to somebody then outside the farm, and look, that's probably where
sometimes it takes someone from the outside to walk in just to have a different view on things.
Oh yeah, it's literally somebody that is familiar with your system, and he sort of will look at something with an independent mind. Makes a huge difference, because it just gets you thinking in different ways of what
absolutely
needs to be done.
So like just like to maybe sum up the whole mineral thing, like, you know, if you are in a high molybdenum area, and obviously farmers have to do the research on that.
Yes.
Like, you would be careful about liming to an extent.
Yeah.
You would be also probably supplementing copper, because if you're in a high molybdenum area, you are definitely going to get a lock-up of copper.
Yeah. And
in whichever, I suppose, in whichever way, let it be licks, buckets, boluses, injection, Dalton sell them all, so it doesn't matter. You know, supplementing is the key.
Yeah, and it's again, it's just, you know, like, does it suit the system? So take, for argument's sake, you're in a high TB area, right? So you're in a black spot, or there's lots of TB around you. And we do know that wildlife love sweet things, they love molasses. So is it prudent to put out a molasses bucket?
Okay, another way to look at things.
Do you know, am I raising the risk of that?
Yes.
Do you know, so then do I look at something different? Do I come in and say...
Boluses.
Yeah. Do I look at, say, Lisa, look, TB is rampant around me.
We'll avoid the buckets.
Well, what's your opinion? What's the feedback from locally? Do you know what I mean? Well, then maybe it might be just, do I look at something else? Then again, like, if you're looking for injections, like if you're you do your milk test or you do your blood test or whatever it is, and its levels are below the optimum level on your result, and you're heading for the breeding season, or your calves aren't thriving, they're not doing their 600 or 700 grams a day, they have brown coats, they're just a bit scruffy looking. Well, now do I need to inject them to get them up? And then what do I give them for a long term?
So you're looking at short term.
So you're looking at short term to get them up to the required level.
And then to sustain.
And then you're looking to sustain. So like if you look at, say, copper, it's stored in the liver. So if you have a young animal, so a calf that's on a deficient copper diet or has a high antagonist knocking it up, so he's not building the level. So it's literally like the sump of a car, and you're not putting enough oil in it.
Yes.
Eventually it's going to give wear or tear up along. The same with selenium held, magnesium, calcium held in the bone structures. So if the young animal isn't getting their requirement, well then as that animal gets older, their reserves are lower
the whole
and
time.
their demands gets bigger.
Yes. Yes.
So it's a little bit of if you monitor the young animals,
it'll come true in age.
Yeah, and if you're finding that you have deficiencies in your older animals, well that automatically is going to be
an issue too.
So they're going to be born. So if the cow is deficient or just marginally,
her calf will be.
The calf is going to be the milk that she drinks if you're feeding whole milk.
So you're on the back foot straight away on a new lease of life.
Yeah. So it's literally measure and just see.
Yes. Well, Bill, that's a massive amount of information. I hope people actually get value out of it. Bill, you'll come back to us again.
I will.
And do a little bit more with us.
I always love to come to Kilkenny.
Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you come out Cork for a few hours?
Lovely county. It's neutral.
much, Bill. Look, thanks a million for coming. Lads, I really hope you enjoyed this episode of Chancellor's Chats, and we'll be back soon with more.